spirit world and humanity are like that.
Say
There's,
it.
they're hybrids.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. So that's just a fact. Genesis 6.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Hope you're all doing awesome today. So Tucker Carlson was recently on the Joe Rogan podcast, gone viral, had a super interesting conversation, hit on so many cool things, but one of the things that really caught my attention was when Tucker Carlson actually references Genesis 6 and talking about hybrids, part human, part divine being. And those of you who've been following me for any length of time, you know I love talking about that subject. Done a ton of videos on it, either on YouTube or on my podcast. I think it's super fascinating. And to hear Carlson and Rogan broach this subject on arguably one of, if not the most popular listened to podcast in the world, talking about the Nephilim, talking about Genesis 6, I think number one is amazing, but number two, it's not by coincidence. There's a reason why 10 years ago, 15 years ago, this conversation was only in a small niche group of people and was so far from mainstream. And now the last 10, 15 years, it has kind of gone full circle now. It is, you can't get more mainstream than the Joe Rogan podcast. And having Tucker Carlson, the most famous dude on the planet right now, and they're talking about it. And so I'm going to use this as a springboard to again broach this subject, which I love to talk about. And so I want to check out that clip to give context here to what I'm actually saying so you can hear it for yourself. But before I get there, I do want to read something from the Book of Enoch. Now, I know a lot of people, they hear the Book of Enoch, they cringe, especially in the Christian circle. They're like, that's not in the Bible, we can't read it, it's demonic and blah, 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 blah. I've done a whole video on this already, so I'll leave it in the description below. Check that video out. Enoch is not in the canon of Scripture, correct. It's not on the level of Scripture, correct. But it can serve as a commentary to what is written in the Bible. It was written 3rd century BC, very contemporaneous to a lot of other writings in the Bible, and it speaks to things. It can give insight into certain things that the Bible does talk about, not to mention that Jude, smallest book in the New Testament, quotes from it, and Peter takes chunks of Enoch and alludes to it in his letters. So if it was good enough for the authors of the Bible to quote it and allude to it in their writings, if it was good enough for Jesus to read it and understand it, for the disciples and the apostles to read it and understand it, for the early church to read it and understand it, it's good for us today. So I want to just read the second verse in 1st Enoch. It says something very interesting. It says, taking up his proverb, Enoch said, the man is just. The vision from God was open to him. He possesses the vision of the Holy One in heaven. He explained this to me, and I heard holy sayings as I listened, and beholding these new things. I did not intend these things for this generation, but I speak on behalf of the one that is far off. So Enoch gets these crazy visions and sees and all this stuff, and all this stuff is spoken to him. But the stuff that he sees is for a generation that is far off. It wasn't for his immediate generation. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that we see ourselves here today, 2024, and the talk of Nephilim, the talk of Genesis 6, the talk of hybrids, all that stuff is like super mainstream. I think the writer of 1st Enoch here predicted it, and I think we are living in that time, that we are that generation. That's my little rant on that. So let's check out what Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan had to say.
At every civilization, every religion, the Greek myths, every single one including Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, has believed that there is sort of that the spirit world and humanity are like that.
Say
There's,
it.
they're hybrids.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. So that's just a fact. Genesis 6.
Come on.
So, I don't think that's crazy at all, given that it has been the belief of civilizations that had no contact with each other.
I don't think it's crazy, and I also don't think it's crazy to consider it. I don't think we have
Of
a real
course not.
map of reality.
Well, we definitely don't. And better put than I explained it. That's exactly right. We don't have a real map, and it's not crazy to consider it. And it was an entirely conventional view up until fairly recently, that the spirit world, like, don't use the phrase breeds with people, but that everyone thought that. Okay.
Right. And even the term spirit world is probably a loaded term.
Yeah, of course, they're all
Whatever
loaded
it
terms.
is,
How do
right.
you say it in a way
Right.
that doesn't sound crazy? But the whole thing sounds crazy because we don't acknowledge the reality, the actual physical reality of the supernatural.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. I love that. I love how Rogan says, it's not even crazy to consider it, to consider this idea of spiritual beings breeding with humans. I mean, this idea is not unique to the Bible. Every ancient civilization that's out there, there's some sort of story, some sort of event that took place with the gods mating with humanity, creating, these demigod, these hybrid beings. Like that's not just unique to the Bible, it's everywhere. And Christians would argue, and my stance is, all those other civilizations, they get that idea and that thinking from the Bible, from Genesis 6. That's ground zero for all of ancient mythology and the story of the gods and Nephilim and demigods, and all of that is taken from Genesis chapter 6. That is the foundation for this whole thinking. And it's crazy to me how it's like you have Carlson and you have Rogan talking about this in front of millions of people, and that this theology, this interpretation, this idea has become so mainstream now that it's on the Rogan podcast. I think it's amazing. So if you're watching this and you're like, what are you talking about? Let me just summarize Genesis chapter 6 so you understand what's going on here. So the first 4 verses, it talks about that the sons of God came to earth. They saw the daughters of men, and they had to have them. And they procreated, intermarried, interbreeded with them, creating a hybrid race called the Nephilim. These half-divine, half-human beings that corrupted the whole world. All major ancient civilizations. I mean, when you look across the world and all the megalithic structures, and you have pyramids, not just in Egypt, but all over. And you have these massive structures and monuments that the mainstream narrative would say it's from, a few thousand years ago. But when you understand the pre-flood world and what was going on, it dates pre-flood. And these Nephilim beings were like, they're seen as the heroes of old, the men of renown. I mean, these were the giants that roamed the earth and creating civilizations everywhere. And this is what precipitated the flood. This is why God had to wipe out humanity. It wasn't just because humans were just really bad people, but it was because the genome was getting corrupted. And you had these divine beings trying to intermingle with human DNA to try to completely wipe out humanity, which is super interesting when you look at what's happening with our modern day phenomena with aliens and the hybridization program there. And then you look at transhumanism with this push to create a human 2.0 where it's human and robot mixed together. It's the same idea. It's this It's this hybridization idea that's been there for thousands of years, and it starts in Genesis chapter 6. And so I've done a whole bunch of videos on this and podcast episodes, so go through my playlist. You'll find it everywhere. But the purpose of this video is I just wanted to comment just to say, man, like this stuff is out there now, and I love it. It's mainstream, this idea. And to have them speak about this, it lends credence to a lot of the biblical scholars that have, been that have been pushing this idea, but from like on the outskirts of society, but now their ideas are now making it, and their theology is making it now mainstream, and it's everywhere. And as we read in Enoch, I don't think it's coincidence. I don't think that it's just by chance that all of a sudden in the last few years, this idea has just gone crazy. I think that we are the generation that Enoch, or the writer of Enoch, was talking about. And that this stuff, because this is what the first book of Enoch addresses. It takes Genesis 6 and expands upon it. And so if you want an interesting read the first book of Enoch. It'll blow your mind. And so I think we are that generation. And I just think it's super cool that this idea has made it mainstream. So let me know what you think down below. What are your thoughts on Enoch? What are your thoughts on Genesis 6? What are your thoughts on what Rogan and Carlson talked about there? Let me know. Let's start a dialogue. And we'll see you all in the next video. Much love. God bless.